Good evening and welcome to CNBC TV18. The US-India Business Council, or USIBC, commenced its two-day conference on the eve of the maiden 2+2 India-US dialogue in New Delhi. The conference is aimed at showcasing the positive impact of the US-India relationship and the opportunities that lie ahead. Speaking at the conference, President and CEO of the US Chambers of Commerce, Thomas Donohue, said that the business community in the States recognizes the importance of the relationship and also added that the commercial partnership between the two nations is taking off like never before. The aim, he says, is to reach $500 billion in two-way trade. Maharashtra Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis was also there. He spoke about Maharashtra leading the way in terms of big infrastructure projects and said he expects to see more from the relationship between India and the US. Let's listen in to some key comments from the USIBC event in Mumbai earlier today.
That dialogue is aimed at strengthening America's defense partnership with India. Just one comment about defense. You can't do defense without economic strength, and the 2+2 will set the groundwork for some things that will not only improve our defense postures, but is clearly going to lead us towards that $500 billion.
I would say the economy is doing great because of President Trump's tax reform, because of regulatory reform, but we have not seen the impact of trade policy yet. And I think we're going to begin to see it in quarterly earnings releases. And we'll probably see it in the macro numbers sometime in the first quarter. But we can't keep on putting tariffs on countries without assuming that there will be an economic repercussion.
The fairness of a relationship is not, confined to trade deficits. Welfare goes way beyond trade in goods. There are services, there are so many other metrics. There's an entire area of e-commerce. So it is not just, goods trade, which reflects prosperity or the fairness of a relationship. We don't see any major reasons for, revisiting trade policies.
Secretaries Pompeo and Secretary Mattis from the U.S. Defense and State Departments are going to be in Delhi meeting with their counterparts there to discuss this overall vision of how we can better cooperate on global security needs. And of course, I'm here as the State Department's economic official, along with our Undersecretary Gil Kaplan from the Department of Commerce, talking about how we can expand the economic relationship. And of course, it's very fitting that we're here in Mumbai, which is the economic center, the financial center of India. We think that this is the right place to have the conversation.
I think the 2+2 dialogue in the context of Indo-US relationships is one of the important fallouts is going to be the impact on business-to-business relationships between India and US, particularly in the area of defense. I do believe that it's the business-to-business dimension from a commerce standpoint of view, which is really going to be the beneficiary of the 2+2 dialogue.
I cannot speculate on what will happen inside the room. So let us say, let's not go there. We can't speculate.
But from your side,
what I can say is this, that for deals which happen in security domain, they are always built on the strong foundation of diplomacy and friendship.
The biggest challenge for all companies is to create a behavioral set of values within your company to be world-class, to have skill, to have perfection.
Right.
But that's internal to us. Some of the challenges are external to us.
Right.
For example, when there are new initiatives like GST,
right.
It also impacts existing programs where, if you take aerospace, it's a global business. If you're doing in-country manufacturing, there's a global supply chain that you become part of.
Absolutely.
You're exporting, but you're also importing some parts. And we cannot afford to have any delays based on any quick changes in the law that happen midstream.
All right, so USIBC pushing for more trade and more bilateral trade between India and the United States. So let's discuss the 2+2 dialogue, because this is the highest level engagement between India and United States ever since Prime Minister Modi visited Washington, D.C. to meet Donald Trump. We are now joined by Vishnu Prakash, former ambassador and MEA spokesperson, Aman Thakur, research associate, Center for Strategic and International Studies. He's joining us from Washington, D.C. And we're also joined by Shailesh Kumar, Director, Asia for the Eurasia Group. Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, if I can come to you first. This morning, Mike Pompeo said that, of course, there will be discussions on Iranian oil and the S-400 air defense systems, but he doesn't see these issues getting resolved. They would like to focus on larger strategic issues that will impact relations for the next 30 to 40 years. What does this really mean? Is this the United States playing hardball, playing tough on these two issues?
Not at all. In fact, he has put things in perspective and put it very beautifully. Just look at the relationship. Till 15 years ago, we were estranged democracies, as Strobe Talbot said in his book. Today, we are engaged democracies. We have come a very long way. And 15 years of engagement is a very intensive engagement where the relationship has literally been transformed in every area. It's a very short period. So we are frankly learning to engage with each other. Our relationship is evolving. US is a predominant power. India is an emerging power. We are both democracies. And we have, say, different styles of functioning and different styles of talking, different styles of different backgrounds. In a way, different aspirations. But we also have similar aspirations in that we see a role that each other has to play. We have a lot to gain from the US. And indeed, the US has been a very valuable partner. I mean, if India and US could put the issue of India's nuclear test behind, and we could solve that major issue, if US could help us get the NSG waiver in 2008, and help us in various other fields. I think the others are a matter of detail. And whether it is trade, whether it is politics, whether it's geopolitics, whether it is the neighborhood, whether it's defense, energy, economic relations, the relationship is going from strength to strength. And I believe that the oil issue with Iran or the question of defense procurement from Russia are issues which are just hiccups, and we can solve that. I don't have any doubt on that.
Okay. All right, I'll take this question because Ambassador Vishnu Prakash has really set up saying that this shows that this is a very large and wide-ranging relationship that we have with the US. But Shailesh, would you agree that the 2+2 dialogue shows that US has a very special place for India in its strategic and foreign policy? And do you think that when Mike Pompeo and James Mattis sit down for talks, then trade and defense ties will be on priority, will be agenda number one?
The U.S. definitely has a very special place for India. I think, as the ambassador highlighted, it warrants recognition how much the U.S. has done on behalf of India and how much its foreign policy has changed in the last 20 years. I know there's a lot of commentators who often point to the fact that maybe the U.S. isn't doing enough, but the U.S. asks too much of India. But I also think it should be pointed out that the U.S. also helped bring India into the nuclear suppliers group, or advocated for it, is advocating for India's inclusion in the United Nations Security Council, gave the civil nuclear deal, is willing to sell just about any weapon platform that India wants with minor restrictions. So there's been a lot done on behalf of the U.S. for India that the U.S. has not done for any of its other countries. I mean, India is a near ally. Now, specifically with the talks, I don't think trade is going to be as much of a focus, just given the portfolios of Pompeo and Mattis. Instead, I do see defense being a high priority. So if we think about the fact that the 2+2 is really a reincarnation of the previous dialogues, the strategic and commercial dialogue, this one is that. However, the focus is going to be more on the strategic part, because the fact that India has now been included in the Asia-Pacific is more of a strategic pull rather than economic pull. And so what the U.S. interests right now really are things like getting Comcast signed, or selling more weapons to India, or having India pivot away from Russia and Iran, for example. Now, I know you asked earlier about those 2 points about Indian purchases of Russian weapons or Indian import of oil. And as they noted, or as the comments you said noted, I don't think the US is as concerned about those with India as it may be with other countries. I think for showmanship, it has to say it's concerned, but deep down, I don't think those are irritants at all. Instead, the focus of these talks is to get India to be more of a strategic partner and to talk about what the US can do in turn as well.
All right, let me go across to Aman. Aman, we would like to pursue this point about trade because the tariffs on steel and aluminium have been disturbing India. We have had several rounds of talks. You've got the Commerce Minister who's traveled to the US. The Commerce Secretary has gone as well. Could there be some sort of package on trade that the two sides could agree to? US has been asking for more market access for its dairy companies, its medical industry as well.
Yeah, we've actually seen a lot of movement on trade with, as you said, the Commerce Minister and the Commerce Secretary sending very high level, arguably tiger teams over to the United States, and the United States reciprocating. So there is likely movement on that. I don't think it'll coincide with the 2+2. I think that's still a discussion that's on a separate track, and that'll continue to operate. But I think that given the high level of engagement, the way that it's gone to the highest levels of minister and secretary, and the interexchange of these tiger teams, really focus on trying to hammer out a deal. I really do think that an agreement could be reached between the United States and India on this tariff issue, particularly I think as after India has postponed its retaliatory tariffs to I think later on in September. I think that also gave both countries a little bit of room to negotiate and figure out a way to reach a compromise that allows this issue to be ended and not to enter into a retaliatory tariff war.
Okay, Ambassador Prakash, if I can come to you, in the run-up to the 2+2 dialogue, we've been hearing a lot of focus on the Indo-Pacific. India sees this as a growth corridor. They would like to have strong relationships which could ensure peace, security and economic prosperity in the region for the next 30 to 40 years. Would we like to gauge how US sees, how the new administration sees the Indo-Pacific?
Well, very much so, but I don't think that there is any doubt about how the US administration sees the Indo-Pacific. We know that very recently the Pacific Command has been renamed as the Indo-Pacific Command. And in practically every utterance, the American leadership does talk of the Indo-Pacific. And for very good reasons, because US and India are both very much interested in a free, open and transparent regimen in the Indo-Pacific region. It is an inclusive concept. And we have both the countries, and for that matter, each and every country in the Indo-Pacific region has an interest in an open regimen, in a free regimen, in a transparent regimen where trade can flourish, economic ties can flourish, commercial ties can flourish. And nobody wants the hegemony of any country in this region, which can retard the relationship or trade relationship or the strategic relationship or the political relationship among countries. So I would think that given the outlook, the positive outlook of the countries concerned, that especially the democratic countries in the area concerned, we will see greater recognition of the desirability of having a free and open regimen in the Indo-Pacific region.
Okay, and I'll take that question now to Shailesh. Shailesh, we're talking a lot about the strategic partnership, and this is something that Ambassador Vishnu Prakash has also spoken about, that there will be a great focus on taking forward the strategic and defense partnership. When it comes to the defense sector, we've been hearing about a hotline between defense ministers, we've been hearing about the COMCASA, and also the appointment of naval liaison officers in Bahrain. What do you think could be key takeaways as far as our defense partnership, defense innovation partnership, and co-production partnerships go?
Sure. So I think COMCASA would be a huge takeaway, but it seems right now what's more likely to happen during the dialogue is there will be an agreement to sign, but the actual signing of the agreement will take place at a later point. To the question of what could be done or where does the relationship go on the defense side, I think the path forward is not just increased military weapons sales. Now, that has been the push for a very long time. Now, obviously, the US side is very interested in that. But the comments we often hear from the Indian side is this cannot be a transactional relationship. That the relationship cannot just be one where the US sells India weapons and that's the end of it. And I think the US side gets that because that message has been made clear over and over, which is why you're now seeing a way to find a path towards other integration methods between the two forces that is not just about military sales. So the word interoperability comes up quite a bit, which is the foundation of COMCASA. And the idea is to intertwine the two armies. Now, that does not mean that India will be a partner in every war that the US takes up, but it does mean that there's greater cooperation between the two, whether it be in naval exercises, which is already happening, whether it be in finding new technologies together, or whether it be in more quiet intelligence cooperation, which is also beginning to happen at a deeper level. Now, on the point of defense, as I mentioned, the sales, defense sales themselves can be a sticking point if they're too aggressive. So instead, you're seeing what we just saw yesterday by the announcement by Lockheed that they're going to start to make F-16 wings in India. This is a very important step forward because it's the first stage in fully developing an F-16 in India when that happens. And it's an evident sign that the US is trying to show to India that they're also interested in investing in the defense sector in India and helping cooperate to build up India's own capabilities in defense. But I think the key thing to look for is, in addition to sales, what are the two sides doing to come together to cooperate better? And this is, again, why I keep focusing on COMCASA, because it's one of the many steps in that direction.
Okay. And Aman, because this is the highest level engagement that we're having with the United States this year, do you think a part of that strategic relationship and strategic outlook would also be that US would like to see during this trip what would be India's approach to Russia, China and Iran in the days, weeks and months to come? Are we willing to reduce our defense imports from Russia? Are we willing to reduce our oil dependency on Iran? What is going to be India's relationship with China in the days to come? Do you think that's also a part of the strategic outlook?
Yeah, I mean, I think the conversations between, all four leaders are going to be pretty broad-ranging. I think, initially, as you asked, Ambassador Prakash, it is going to focus on the Indo-Pacific and focusing on that predominantly, especially that has become a forefront of President Trump's foreign policy. But I do think that there's going to be some discussion about, the engagement that India has with Russia. Obviously, as Sailesh mentioned, the United States would like to at least see the dependence on Russian weapons go down. And that's something that they would like to see, especially with the S-400 Spectre hanging over the talks. On Iran as well, that has been an issue that has already been brought up when Ambassador Haley was in Delhi. When President Trump announced a withdrawal from the JCPOA, that was a point of discussion about Chabahar Port and about oil imports. I think that will obviously be a concern. And then always the unnamed participant or country that is being discussed in the Indo-Pacific, whether in the room or outside, sometimes is China. And that's going to be something that we are going to see being discussed, especially as the United States and India view China and its actions somewhat differently. The United States obviously wanting to have India be more active in the Pacific part of the Indo-Pacific, whereas India trying to bring the United States' attention to Chinese activities in the Indian Ocean. That's obviously going to be a point of discussion in the Indo-Pacific. How can we balance the concerns of both countries across the vast Indo-Pacific to make sure that both countries have their concerns addressed and that both countries are working strategically towards addressing that concern?
Okay, convergence of interests. US would like to see how much can India match its foreign policy and strategic interests as well. We're going to take a short break with that, but we'll request all our panelists to stay with us.
अब सब हक से लगाएंगे इंडिया का पहला 5-स्टार एलईडी बल्ब। तो ऑर्डिनरी एलईडी हटाओ, ओरिएंट 5-स्टार एलईडी बल्ब लगाओ।
शिखर भाई क्या पेंट लगाया, सुपर्ब।
अरे भाई ताव सही।
नेरोलैक एक्सेल माइका मार्बल, जो घर को दे माइका की शक्ति और मार्बल की शान, और आपको दे तारीफ की गारंटी।
दर्द मैं सा हूं और टेस्ट डमी पे। कम ऑन, ट्राई मी। not hard enough. मैदान आपका हो या मेरा, दर्द कभी भी हरा सकता है। नया Volini Max, India's strongest pain relief spray. I trust Volini Max. Only Volini Max. Defeat pain instantly.
All right, let's go back to our panelists and Ambassador Vishnu Prakash. India has been emphasizing, and top sources in the government have themselves ruled out that the S-400 air defense deal is not on the agenda but may come up for discussions. This may not be resolved, but do you think that the US would understand our point that the S-400 air defense system is in the interest of a stronger India and a stronger strategic relationship with the United States as well? Do you think this argument is going to cut ice? What will the US want from India in order to make sure that this waiver is given?
Well, there are two aspects to the whole thing. First, the facts. For years and decades, almost 80% of our defense needs came from USSR and then from Russia. This was during the Cold War and immediately after the Cold War. And so now from 80%, our import dependence or our dependence on Russia for our defense needs has come down to 60%. That's on one side. On the other hand, for the first 60 years, till about 2008, our total imports from defense imports from the US were about $400 million. 60 years, $400 million. And the last 10 years, it has gone up to $15 billion. USA has already become our second largest defense partner in terms of defense equipment. That is one side of the matrix. Now let's look at the other side. I am not very comfortable with the narrative that US wants us to reduce our dependence on Russia. Why would we want to do, as an independent country, as a country of 1.3 billion people, as an emerging power, why would we want to do what the US wants us to do? We will do what is in our interest, and given the fact that US and India relationship is growing, convergence of interests is growing, obviously our defense cooperation with the USA is intensifying. So I would like to look at it from that perspective, and I would wish and hope that instead of being prescriptive, US were to look at it from India's point of view also, that we would do whatever it takes to secure our borders, secure our fences. And if our relationship, our defense relationship with the US is going to help us in that direction in terms of our strategic defense, security. But of course, we're wanting to do that. Okay. That is what is happening. So I think that if the US were to be prescriptive with India and say, look, we don't want you to be importing 400 SAMs from Russia, I don't think that is going to take us very far. And I frankly don't see in a closed room when the two sides are going to discuss. I don't think that will be the kind of narrative that will happen. We need to build on our convergences between US and India, and that is what is happening.
All right. Okay, and Shailesh, if I can come to you, if we talk about Iranian oil, we have been saying in the run-up to this summit that we have, or we will be importing at least 2.5 billion worth of oil and gas from the US in this calendar year. We're an energy-reliant country. 83% of our energy needs are met by imports. 25% of that comes from Iran. Is this argument going to cut ice with both Mr. Mattis and Mr. Pompeo?
Yeah, so a few points on Iranian oil. First is there's already been an actual reduction of imports from India so far, so we've seen at least. There has been a reduction in imports. The private sector refiners in India have reduced, in some cases altogether, eliminated Iranian oil. And the reason is not that they've been told to do so, but because they're private sector companies that operate all over the world, they do not want to have to deal with the headaches of going up against the Western financial banking system or losing market access to international markets. So they've reduced. Now, the public sector refiners, the government-owned refiners, are still importing. And in our view, they will continue to import. And I think the Indian side has made very clear why Iran is such an important strategic partner of India or a friend. And there's a host of reasons, that are specific to India, but some of those reasons are also important to the US. Now, Nikki Haley was in India in June, as Aman mentioned, and one of the things that came up was the port of Chabahar, which in the past was a big red line for the US. But one of the interesting things is in June, for the first time, she admitted publicly that she understands or essentially tacitly okayed the Indian involvement in Chabahar. And the reason is that if the US wants India to have a greater role in Afghanistan, and if the US wants to undermine Chinese influence in Asia, then India needs to have Chabahar. It's the only way. And the US understands this point. So you're seeing a softening on Iran, at least specific to India. And I think oil fits into this category too, where the Indian side has made very clear that given India's needs for energy, it has to continue to import some level of oil, and given the strategic friendship. So I don't think the US side is going to pressure India too hard on a private level.
Okay, and Aman, if I can come to you, we have been speaking about the Indo-Pacific, we have been speaking about our trade relations, our defense partnership, our strategic partnership. How do you see discussions on counterterrorism? Could there be discussions on designating more entities during this 2+2 dialogue?
I think that will feature in the conversations, obviously, you know, given the President Trump and his administration's rhetoric on Pakistan and the support that they've, you know, given to India on preventing terrorism. I think that is something that could be a point of discussion. Obviously, I think that falls less on the pecking order compared to some of the bigger, more strategic issues that we've talked about. Obviously, the Indo-Pacific being, you know, one of the biggest constructs, one of the biggest sort of ideas that the Trump administration has put out. Rex Tillerson coming here to CSIS and saying that India and the United States are going to be the port and starboard lights. That's, I think, going to be the priority of the discussion. But I do believe that, you know, convergences on counterterrorism are ripe for, you know, building upon. That's a foundation that can continue to be growing between the U.S. and India and can, you know, further the strategic relationship.
All right. And Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, just about 10 seconds. Do you think what happens in the 2+2 will actually make the US decide whether Donald Trump should come to India for Republic Day or not?
Well, I think it's not 2 into 2 which makes 4. 2 into 2 makes 22. It's a process. I think that Donald Trump will be visiting India. It's a question of the mutual convenience of both sides. But certainly the level of engagement is increasing very rapidly, and which is in the mutual interest of both the countries. And I am frankly very happy at the manner in which the relationship, multifaceted relationship, is growing in every sphere.
All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Prakash, Aman Thakur, Shailesh Kumar, for joining us. All eyes now on the 2+2 dialogue, which takes place tomorrow. Comprehensive discussions on the entire bilateral relationship between India and the United States. Thank you for watching.